if Christianity were true, and it meant you had to give up everything to follow God, would you want to know the truth? I was a mama's boy. Every time we went out somewhere, if I were scared, I would run up to my mom. I would stay very close to her. If I were sick, I would put my head on her tummy. I was very, very close to my mother. My earliest memories are of my mother every day sitting me next to her and having me put on my skull cap and showing me how to recite the Quran letter by letter. I finished the Quran when I was 5 years old, and by that time I had memorized the last 7 chapters so that I could recite them during the 5 daily prayers. To be raised Muslim in the United States was a point of pride because we believed that we had the truth. In my freshman year of college, my best friend and I had many conversations about faith, and we argued all the time about Islam versus Christianity. But one specific day, he pulled me aside and he said, "Nabeel, if Christianity were true, and it meant you had to give up everything to follow God, would you want to know the truth?" It took a long time before I was able to determine for myself, even if I lose everything, it's worth it. And when my parents did find out, it was the most painful day of my life, probably the most painful day of their lives too. And I'll never forget the look in my mother's eye. Her whole life is Islam, just like my life was, and now my whole life is Christ, and there's no connection anymore. But to have Christ in my life makes every loss worth it. My hope and my prayer for this book is that everyone who picks it up would draw closer to one another. Muslims by understanding the gospel, Christians by understanding the passion and the love that Muslims have, and ultimately through all of this, so that we can arrive at the truth and at a glory that will be given to God.
Welcome back. Nabeel Qureshi was born a Muslim. By his own account, he loved and practiced Islam devoutly, and yet he made the unexpected journey to Christianity. What did he find lacking about Islam, and what attracted him to Christianity? I'm here with Dr. Shabir Ally to review Qureshi's autobiographical work, Seeking Allah, Finding Jesus. Now, Dr. Shabir Ally, welcome to Let the Quran Speak.
Thanks for having me on.
Now, you've had a chance to read the book. What are your initial thoughts on the book?
Well, the book is very interesting to read. It's well written, and
compellingly read.
Yes, it's written almost like a suspense novel, like what's going to happen next. You want to know. It's a page turner in that way. Very interesting little tidbits, humorous moments, a lot of emotion in the book because his turning from Islam was not handled well by his family. So there was a lot of grief to deal with, and so on. So all of that is very interesting and engaging, but from an academic standpoint, I would have preferred that he gave us a simple timeline of events that we can trace historically in order for us to understand from an academic perspective, why is it that somebody would choose one religion over another. So this is, I had to piece through, for example, I had to create my own little timeline to discover, for example, that he must have been 23 years old when he made that change. Lacking that kind of timeline does not give us the full picture in a way that allows us to evaluate his reasons for making that change.
So he came from a religious family. He was someone who read the Quran, who prayed regularly. So what happened? How did he embrace Christianity?
Well, as he explained in the introduction to his book, he will not be following a necessarily blow-by-blow account and giving us chronologically the way things happen. He's taking some liberties this way in writing his autobiography. What he does in this book then is that he separates the two issues. First, his view of Christianity, and second, his beefs with Islam, as though they were two entirely different things, one examined by itself without interacting with the other, and then later on just the other. In other words, first he sets up the stage of showing us why he could, as a Muslim, accept Christianity, and then secondly he goes into ideas about Islam that he finds to be unpalatable or difficult to reconcile with. To me, it could not have been so detached. The two must have been in constant conversation with each other. In other words, he must have been thinking every day, is it Islam or is it Christianity? And is it this belief or that belief from Christianity, that belief from Islam, constantly comparing the two. And yet that's not how he lays out the book. He just deals with one and then goes and deals with the other. Mm-hmm. And that to me is a flaw in the presentation, in that it does not allow us to see the actual picture. For example, if he wants to say that, well, I find some things in Islam to be violent and I don't like violence, and I find Christianity to be peaceful, well, okay, that's fine if he's evaluating the two simultaneously. But what he does, for example, is that he goes to the Quran, he finds some verses about war, he puts away the book, he's disgusted by that. Then he goes to pick up the Bible and he decides, well, where do I start? Okay, I think I better start with the New Testament. So he goes and he starts with the New Testament.
Which is much more peaceful.
Of course. So by doing that, he's conveniently ignored the Old Testament, which depicts many occasions of war and violence.
So you think it's not a completely intellectual exercise then?
No. Although it is quite interesting that throughout the book, Nabeel tosses and turns with ideas, and he tries to evaluate them intellectually, and he gives every impression that he's dealing with this in a purely intellectual manner, so that one should not get the impression that he's just arriving at the conclusions to which he's predisposed. Like when you think he's arriving at a conclusion that he will be predisposed to, he starts criticizing the very position. So you get the idea that here is a man who is carefully evaluating every idea and criticizing them from every angle possible, and then finally arriving at what he would deem to be the truth after all objections have been answered. But in that too, one finds that his analysis is lacking. For example, he does not consider all of the possibilities. If one is going to leave one religion and go to another one, then that means one is so dissatisfied with one's own religion that one is actually seeking something new. Mm-hmm. And if you're seeking something new, then do you just evaluate something new, or do you evaluate like a gamut of possibilities and then pick one? So why is it only Christianity among the world's religions? Why not Buddhism, for example?
Well, it seems like he had this friend, David Wood, who perhaps influenced him.
Exactly. And I would add further that it's not only religions that you will evaluate also non-religion. Like, what about the possibility of being an agnostic if you're leaving Islam? Mm-hmm. How does it go from Islam to Christianity as a one-way street? And you're right, according to the book, his friend David Wood was highly influential.
So they seem to be having conversations about Islam and Christianity.
True, continuing conversations, and in fact they became best of buddies to the extent that they would be in class, and instead of listening to the lecture they would be giggling with each other and passing notes to each other. Well, all of this is described in the book in story style, engaging and entertaining style, and that makes it difficult to pick out the facts where they occur. And I spoke about Nabeel's reticence here to evaluate all of the possible scenarios and to pick the best one. One of the things I find entirely lacking, the silence about this is deafening, is the description of his dissatisfaction with the particular brand of what he calls Islam he was following. Let me be more specific. Now, most of the world's population of Muslims are following what is referred to as the Sunni faith. These make up about 80 to 85% of the world following of Muslims. And another 10% or so are the Shi'is, and then another 5% approximately, 5 to 10 maybe max, is made up of all splinter groups. One of the splinter groups is the one that follows a man from the Indo-Pak subcontinent, Mirza Ghulam Ahmad, who died in the year 1908. He started out, he claimed to be Jesus having come back, not the actual physical Jesus, but someone in the power and spirit of Jesus. So whereas Muslims and Christians were expecting the Messiah Jesus to arrive down from the sky, he said he is the actual embodiment of the Messiah. There's no, Jesus is not coming back as we expected, but he is that Jesus. So he is the promised Mahdi, the guided one. He's the promised Messiah. He is Jesus, and all of this. And that made him a prophet, and he claimed, in his words, to be a prophet. Now that spawned two sets of beliefs. One is the mainstream of his following, headed by his son, Mirza Bashir, who said that he should be taken literally. He is a real prophet of God. He received revelation from God. And because he's a prophet, if anyone does not believe in him, they are actually non-believers. And therefore, the vast majority of Muslims, including Sunnis and Shi'is, according to this definition, are non-Muslims. So they regard us as non-Muslims, and then the Muslim scholars responded by saying, well, you're actually non-Muslims because you're following a man who claimed to be a prophet after the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and this is impossible. Yes.
So do you think Nabeel is comparing, Ahmadiyya Islam with Christianity then, and finding the, the Jesus of Christianity seems much better?
Well, it's interesting that in his book he doesn't do that.
Okay.
He mentions his Ahmadiyya upbringing, he mentions his attendance at Ahmadiyya conferences and so on, but he does not get to this point of saying, well, what about the promised Messiah, our Mirza Ghulam Ahmad, the founder of our movement? Is he Jesus or not? Is he the coming back of Jesus? Is he the Mahdi and the Messiah? He doesn't address that question at all. And to me, it is hard to escape that question. You see, when somebody belongs to a minority, whether a sect or whatever, or they have a particular beef that they're trying to advance, a particular motive or policy or principle and so on that they're trying to advance, well, they know that inside out, and they know how it compares with other belief systems, and they're ready to answer objections. They're ready to defend their minority view against the majority. So if Nabeel was so schooled in the differences between Islam and Christianity and so on, and defending the Islamic faith, he definitely was also schooled in defending the Ahmadiyya faith vis-a-vis the Sunni faith. He would have known something about the claims of Mirza Ghulam Ahmad, and he either accepted or rejected that. Now, I would have to, in the end, obviously he's rejected that, but there is no place in his book where he compares this founder's claim with Christianity. He just compares Islam, which is known more generally, with Christianity.
Dr. Shabir Ally, unfortunately we have to end there, but we can take it up perhaps some other time. Thank you.
Sure.
We'll take a break. When we return, we answer questions we receive from you, our viewers.